Hello, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 7 of the Midwest Gaming Classic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Garris, Panel Director of the Midwest Gaming Classic. Jeffrey Wittenhagen and Kyle Gilbert of the VGBS podcast discussed the year 1990 in their Video Game Culture Chronicles at the 2016 Midwest Gaming Classic Convention. And you know what? Enough of me talking. Why don't we get to the podcast?
In this next panel, video game historians Jeffrey Wittenhagen and Kyle Gilbert discuss the 1990s in their culture chronicles of the history of video games.
Alright everybody, we're going to get started. Welcome to VGBS Live. We are the Video Game BS podcast. This is the Video Game Culture Chronicles 1990s panel. What we're going to cover, just to do a little disclaimer, we're going to let the conversation flow as the river goes. So we may not stick strictly to the year 1990. We'll hit everything we can go to. And in VGBS fashion, if anybody's ever listened to our podcast, we always get some special guests, and we got somebody sitting here that wasn't on the panel thing. He's going to introduce himself in a minute. For introductions, my name's Jeffrey Wittenhagen. I'm a published author. I published the Complete NES and the Video Game Culture Chronicles book series that's on Patreon. People can subscribe, get some physical books based on retro gaming. Get your retro gaming needs, your fix. I've also been on the VGBS podcast with Kyle over here for a year. We cover everything within video games, and we definitely tell personal stories. We want to have maximum participation, so we have free games to give away and t-shirts to give away to anybody who participates. We got some gimme questions. They're real easy questions, and I want John White to heckle us. Yes, absolutely. Big JT, yes. All right, so I'll hand it over to Kyle. Introduce yourself.
I'm Kyle. I've been doing no death runs, high score runs for a number of years. Just been a gamer my whole life. I can offer a perspective. I was born in 1983, so much like a lot of you, were born during that era. So just add in my perspective there.
And our special guest.
Hi, I'm Martin Alessi. I've been a gamer since I was a very small child. And I had the fortune of getting a job at EGM when I was 16 years old. And I worked there for about 5 years and through the 90s. And I got to play a lot of the greatest 8 and 16-bit games that we all love.
Nice. So yeah, we have somebody here that was the editor-in-chief, senior editor of EGM during 1990s. So, I mean, we have the subject matter expert with us today to answer and tell some stories. And that's what we're doing. We're just telling stories. What I want to do, though, is I'm going to get started off with somebody to answer a question. All right, so name a game that was ported from an arcade game and is completely different for the console version. We got one hand up. All right, come up here. You gotta get you on the microphone. What's your name?
Matt.
And what do you have for one?
This was easy. Punch Out.
Punch Out, correct. All right, Kyle, grab the bag. He'll be our Vanna White for the day. So. You can either grab a t-shirt, game, whatever. We got here, he picked up a GameCube release.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so games that were ported from the arcade and are extremely different, that's one that's really, really near and dear to my heart. One of my favorite games that was ported and it's 100% different, Double Dragon 2. I love Double Dragon 2. Myself and Kyle, we've been playing forever. We're actually cousins. We've grown up together, and that's how we started the VGBS podcast. Me and him would get on the phone and BS on the phone for hours, and we always said, like, why aren't we recording this? We're always going analytically deep into games, and when we would get together on the weekends, we would play Double Dragon 2, and we would be sitting here drinking our beer, and we'd set the world record, like, randomly all the time for cooperative Double Dragon 2. And we would go and do no death runs and all that stuff just because we played it so much through repetition. It was always a classic time. And the best part was when we would sit there, and if you know Double Dragon 2 on the NES, how it's a little different from the arcade one, you do this special move called the Hyper Knee. And with the Hyper Knee, the enemies go flying, and the sound effects like, wow, wow, and the guys go flying, and myself and him had it down to a point where we could do multiple Hyper Knees in a row. So like the guys' little chins with the sticks would flip, and we would like knee them in the air, and they go flying, and then they get up, and then Kyle would knee them in the air back at me, and then we'd do that for like every single one. They wouldn't even stand a chance, and we were over there laughing, going nuts, and like it's a hilarious game. What do you got on Double Dragon?
Yeah, we always try to play that one whenever we get like together. So hopefully we'll try tonight, get like a high score or something. But yeah, the repetition.
Where are we doing that tonight at? Where at?
Nintendo Age. Woo! Yeah, repetition though is the key.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
like with the Castlevania, I was just playing that all day, and eventually the levels, you know, it's just smooth. It's like a knife through butter eventually, because you know everything that's coming up. But as far as like the arcade conversions, the NES had so many of them.
Yeah.
Like Double Dragon, you know, even the first one, you know, Ninja Gaiden. I mean, there's so many, and they were completely different games. That's kind of what blew me away.
Swan Song 2, Contra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing game.
And then those spun off like Super C and stuff, so they spun off other sequels.
Yeah, I have to get into this conversation. Okay. Yeah, Super C on the NES was greatly different than the arcade version of it. I actually, at one point in time, had the world record on Super Contra in the arcade. I held it for about 15, maybe 17 years, and then Pete Hahn is a good friend of mine. He took the record over at the Galloping Ghost Arcade. And I think one of the biggest differences from Super C to the arcade version is the weapons would increase in power if you collected them more than once. And I really missed that in the NES version.
Yeah, one of the things with Super C to me that was really different was like the characters kind of jumped in an arc on the arcade. Then you had the classic Contra where you do the roll in the air. It always felt more fluid to me on the NES version of Super C. It's always pretty cool. And of course, we always collect the spread. I mean, gotta get the spread. All right, so the next question right here. All right, let's see. Name an SNES launch title that's not Super Mario World. Got one.
There we go. That's like the only
Pilot Wings. Pilot Wings, correct. Come over and get a take a bag over to him. So he said though Pilot Wings is that the only game. It is not. There was a bunch of games released. Some of the major ones you had was F-Zero. F-Zero was released. In the Famicom land, they had SimCity released the same way, and Actraiser in the same year.
Jalico's Big Run.
Jalico's Big Run, exactly. There was a bunch of different games released, but Pilot Wings was the game that was synonymous with Super Mario World on that first day. The thing that people get confused on and why they think there was only two games is because with the N64 many years later, it was Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64. It was only two games. And people get confused.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Exactly. Whoa, that was loud. So Super Nintendo though, that was a system that was near and dear to my heart, and as I'm going through the Video Game Culture Chronicles, 1991 has the launch of the Super Nintendo. And for me, like, that was the first game system that I actually went and I had to work a part-time job to earn, because it happened to fall on the time where my parents weren't going to buy me one for Christmas. So I was sitting there and I was saving up money so I could get the system. Now, did I get it at launch? No. It took me years to save up for the system. I think I ended up getting it with the Mario World, Mario All-Stars combination cartridge, which was about 4 years after it was released. It took me to save up for the system. But during that time, I did what a lot of people did. I would go play it at neighbors' houses that would have all the systems. That would include like being able to play the TurboGrafx 16, the Neo Geo, all those systems that there's no way my parents are going to buy that for me. And I would go to their houses and play it. And it wet my whistle. It made me want the systems even more. And I was sitting there saving up as much as I could as a kid. We were all terrible with money back in the day. But I made sure that I was able to get that system. And it was a big, huge deal for me when I finally got my Super Nintendo. And
yeah, the other big thing is going to their houses, because you didn't really know what all the games looked like as far as the gameplay goes. I mean, we couldn't look it up on YouTube, you couldn't Google it. If you had online, you had what, AOL and Prodigy maybe, so you had some still, yeah. So you had like still images. You couldn't have any video, So so when you went to the rental stores too, you didn't know, you had just a screenshot to base it off.
Exactly.
Now, the one cool thing was we did have the magazines, and the magazines were the things that you could pick up and say,
Exactly.
Someone's writing a review on it. Okay, I get it a little more.
Yeah, like for me, it was like going to the schoolhouse and talking with other kids that might have found the warp whistles in Mario 3 and myself, as well as like the magazines when you had the Counselor's Court and Nintendo Power and all the hints and tricks areas and classified information and all those things as well. The infamous Sushi X sessions and all that stuff over at EGM side too. Because like EGM was your way to get your non-Nintendo fix, and Nintendo Power had like a pigeonhole on subscriptions in my area. Yeah. But like the guys who went on EGM, that's when you got your Sega Genesis, you knew about what Genesis does with Nintendo. I mean, those are the classic times.
So tell us the story of when you started.
Let's just say I was green. When I got the EGM job, it was luck, and in 1991, I think it was, Super Famicom was released in Japan, and I got the Super Famicom. I never got a Super Nintendo until years later, but it's an interesting story. I bought my Super Famicom in Japan, and it was my first plane trip ever. I was only 18 years old, and I'd never been on a plane before. So that was a little interesting. And we went to Shinjuku. I think that's how you say it. Shinjuku. And it was like a paradise, because it was everything that we had. I was a part of the magazine, and Ed would go on trips to Japan at Simrad. And so I would read about this stuff, and we had copies of the games at the office. But to actually be in Japan during the 8 and 16-bit era was, that was a real treat. So I bought my Super Famicom in Japan. I stood in line and bought it in Japan, and I picked up, Super Mario World, Pilot Wings, and Big Run, which was just a terrible game. And then I came home, and that was the envy of all my friends,
That's pretty cool, though. You were able to pick up the Super Famicom before it was released. And that was the second run you were talking about, 1991, with the Super Famicom coming out. Because even in Japan, it was sold out during the late 1990 release when it came out. It was super late 90s. But like the Christmas rush, they actually closed down and limited console releases to a weekend because kids all skipped school to go to the Super Famicom release back in 1990. So it was that popular. So yeah, by the time 1991 hit, you were able to get a copy finally when you went over there, because they finally had it in stock in stores. Like craziness though. So there's one thing Kyle said that leads into our next question. This one isn't just one answer. I want to hear a little bit of substance for whomever answers this. Name a game that you were tricked by from the box art. Because Kyle was mentioning that some of the box arts, you would have to gauge your purchases based on going to a store. So what I want to hear is somebody who went to a store, bought a game from a box art, come on up, bought a game from the box art and was completely tricked. I want to hear why though, because these are the glory days right here. All right. All right, what's your name?
Tushar.
Tushar. All right, what is your game?
It was Neon Genesis Evangelion for the Nintendo 64. I picked it up. I was a kid. I couldn't understand a word of it because it was all in Japanese. But it doesn't say that on the front of the box. It's all in English. Yeah.
So it wasn't even translated. Wow.
You know, look on the back, but they didn't have that on the display or anything, and they just wanted to move it. So.
That's awesome though. So it was like N64 style. Still got to see you from Nintendo.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll go ahead and go into the bag of tricks, Kyle. That's excellent. So one of the main games that fooled me, there's a million games that were so terrible. One of them that really sticks out, Phalanx on the Super Nintendo, Phalanx, where it has the old man playing a banjo on the front cover, and the game is a bullet hell shoot 'em up. And the irony is, you see a bullet hell shoot 'em up, you think it's cool, but the irony is that it's actually, Phalanx is actually like a kind of a mediocre one. It's not even that good of a bullet hell shoot 'em up. It's nowhere near like a Spriggan on the PC Engine, or like a classic shoot 'em up, like Lords of Thunder on Sega CD and PC Engine. Like there's some really good games, and you see Phalanx, and you see this old man playing a banjo, and you're like, what is this? Why would I pick that up? I mean, and that goes to one though, that game's not as bad though as some of the games that are on. Yeah.
Hydlide comes to mind.
Hydlide.
That was one that got me, because I always thought that was a great cover. Deadly Towers is another one. It's just like, man.
Well, you always got it with the medieval style games. You
Right.
love that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just kind of like, man, that's not really what I expected, you know?
Those games have mediocre gameplay.
Ooh, we have a Hydlide story.
Yes.
Highland. All right. Well, before I worked at EGM, I worked for FCI, the publisher of Highline. And I worked on the tip line answering questions on how to beat the game.
I'm sorry.
Me too. Yeah, those were fun times, and I have not played the game since then. I'll tell you that.
That music.
Were there any other
Yeah.
charts that for you?
For me, okay. Okay, this is kind of a reverse situation.
Okay.
Most awful box art that I've ever purchased is probably the first Mega Man, but the game was solid. So the box art was terrible, the marketing on it was terrible, but the game was great.
We got another one up in the audience, and if you have a story, feel free to chime in. You can get some free swag. All right, so what's your game, man? What's your name first?
My name is Pietro,
All right.
and this one's a little bit embarrassing, but there's a game for the Nintendo DS called Field of Magic, which is essentially a group of mini games, but the box art is a lady in a bikini. So 13-year-old me waltzed into GameStop, found this game with a bikini on the front. It was only teen, and I said, finally! I picked it up, and it was a bunch of Wario mini games, so that was very disappointing for...
It still got you. That's awesome. That was a good one. If anybody else has any stories, just throw a hand up, and you can come over here. Hey, Pedro, come over here and get a game or a shirt or something, man. It's classic stuff, though. All right, so go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, and the Mega Man was great, because Mega Man 2 also was very bizarre.
Yeah, it was like they gave the artists the freedom to do whatever they want. They said, hey, there's this game about a robot cop that's going to be fighting off robots or something, and then they drew Mega Man with the little gun on the first one. And the second one, they still didn't get it right. It's like they had a guy who never played a video game in his life. He's just a good artist and started drawing for it. It's classic. Yeah. All right, so go to this one.
Share your first gaming story.
So share your first time that you played a video game when video games connected with you. Just want a story here. No question, just a story. Anybody have anything? Get some free swag. No? I can go into mine. All right. So video games started off with me. I actually had an Atari 2600 handed over from my brother and my sister. Had Pitfall on it, Pole Position, all those classics. We actually had an Atari Super Pong in my household too. And we went over to the Commodore 64 as well. My brother actually saved up half for the computer, and then my parents paid for the other half because he got it for educational uses, right? Because the Commodore was an educational machine. And we just played games on it tons. That's when the first time when you saw the emulation and bootlegging scene start. Because somehow, without the internet, we had hundreds and hundreds of copies of games for the Commodore 64 in my household. I don't know how that happened. Like that trading scene must have been insane to reach Podunk, Indiana, where I'm from originally, and they had like a bunch of different versions. I think we owned 3 actual Commodore games, yet we had a big case filled with them. And it's insane because now I go and I collect the box start versions of the Commodore games because they're awesome, the big boxes and everything. They're great. And they're super hard to find too now for the Commodore versions because it's hard to find PC boxes now. The Commodore ones are crazy. But like as I grew up, my first system that I got as a kid as a gift was the NES. And I got a hand-me-down NES from my sister who didn't play it. And I got it with Ghosts and Goblins, TNC Surf Designs, and Mario Duck Hunt. And that always runs rampant, and that's why my first book was the complete NES, because I collect the NES. That's why I'm a part of Nintendo age. As my most nostalgia is for the Nintendo. Even though I play all video games, Nintendo is what strikes with me. I mean, that's always been what it is. And I started in 1990 for my Culture Chronicles, because that's when I really started to come of age as a gamer. I started to get pretty good at games, started to play them, started to rent them more, having those stories of Mario 3 and all the different shows that came out that corresponded. That's what really hit me with gamer stories, man. But like, that's me. So what are yours, Kyle? And if anybody has a story, raise your hand up through this, and we got one. We'll get him first, Kyle. Sorry. All right, what's your name?
My name is Zach.
All right.
All right, so it's not a console, but I had an old TRS-80 when I was a kid, about 4 or 5 years old, and there was a game called Football. And since I liked winning when I was a kid, I would always play 2-player with myself only. And what you would do is you would pick the offensive and defensive plays. Well, I knew the combination of offense and defense to make the offense fumble every time, or to get a touchdown every time as the offense.
That's awesome.
So I would do that over and over and over again because I like winning.
Yeah.
And eventually I moved into NES because my grandma had a couple, my parents loved it and stuff like that. But yeah, going back to TRS-80 and football and cheating. Great.
And there's always something about when you play a game and you make it do something that it's not supposed to do. Like when you're playing Mario Brothers and you jump over in World 1-2 and you jump over and you get to that warp zone. It doesn't feel like you're supposed to do that. It feels like you're kind of hacking. And then later on they had the minus worlds and all that too. But it's like, it was always fun to hack around and do stuff that you're not really supposed to do. That's an awesome story right there with the football. Go ahead and grab us from Kyle's bag of swag. Go ahead, Kyle. What's your gaming story?
You also mentioned shows, video game shows, like Captain N, but you also had the Power Team, the Game Master. Yeah. The cool thing about the Power Team, though, is you had that footage at the end where they showed the hints and stuff. So that was that sacred footage, you know. Because you would, like you were saying, save up, spend $50, and then you find out that this game, isn't so good.
Does anybody here know what the Power Team is? No? We got a couple no's. So the Power Team was a acclaimed knockoff of Captain N, the Game Master. Everybody knows Captain N with all the Nintendo characters. The acclaimed version, you had Bigfoot in there. You had Kuros from Wizards and Warriors. You had Quirk from the Game Boy version. The irony is you had the guy from Video Power. It was Johnny Arcade, and he's sitting there playing the Nintendo. And all these characters come out of his NES. And Quirk, who's a Game Boy handheld game, came out of the NES as well. It was like little like hints there, like little errors right back in the day. You also had Tyrone from Double Dribble in that one too. I think there was one more character. He was from one of the Narc. He was one of the guys from Narc as well. Yeah, Mr. Big was one of the bad guys. And actually, right after us, we're gonna have Eugene Jarvis. He did Narc, so that's a classic little segue right there. But yeah, the Power Team was classic.
Yeah, and then you had like the rentals, So when I started, I got it about a year later than most people did. And from that point, my dad, who actually was a social studies teacher, his students would tell him, you know, you gotta get Contra, you gotta get Final Fantasy. So that was cool. He would come home and kind of give me the scoop on what was the good game. And that's kind of the thing with the rentals too, where our analytical minds really went to work, where with the certain rentals, why are they out every single week? Why is Contra never in, you know?
It makes you want it more. It makes you want that game more. When you see Contra, you can't have it. Or Mario 2, which we couldn't find at the store, Super Mario Brothers 2, and it's never in.
It was so hard to find.
Super Mario 2 was actually hard to find back in the day, and that's when you knew, when you saw so many copies of Mario 3, that it was a great game. You never saw Mario 2.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not that kind of party?
I have to say, Pitfall 2 on the Atari 2600 was the first platforming game that I really fell in love with. It was very advanced for the hardware. And that was a style of game that I really have loved since I was a child. So when I went into the arcade and I played Versus Super Mario Brothers, it hit a nerve with me. I fell in love with that game and didn't know there was an NES. I was just walking through Toys R Us with my father one day. We were looking for Star Wars figures. And basically I saw the NES and I saw the control deck. Just had the controllers, the deck, and then Super Mario Brothers. And I had to have it. And he couldn't get it for me at that exact time. But man, Christmas came that year and I got the NES control deck. I still have it. I still have it in the box with the manual and everything. So that had a huge impact on me when I was younger. And I did when I was, I think, 6th or 7th grade, I did a fanzine called the Elite Players Club. And it was myself, Ray Price, who I ended up getting a job at EGM, and then Paul Jada, who also I got a job at EGM later once I was established there. And basically, I did this little fanzine on a typewriter, and I would photocopy it. And I had a friend who was Japanese, and he used to get Famitsu. So I would get photocopies of games and scoop the U.S. magazines in my little fanzine. And so when I met the publishers of EGM, and I showed them my little fanzine, they're like, "You have games in your magazine we don't have in our magazine yet." And that's how I pretty much got my foot in the door.
That's awesome. So you got your foot in the door because they already knew that you knew what you're talking about with games because you were already doing it as a hobbyist.
I was only 16, so if anyone's out there with the internet and social media, you can do it. You can be a part of video game journalism, and you can establish yourself by reporting on stuff and being unique. And right now YouTube channels are the big thing for the youth. So I mean, this was 25 years ago, and I was young, and I was able to, more than 25 years ago. But if you're a young person and you really love video games, you can get into the business. There are more avenues now than there were back when I was a kid.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wanted a Nintendo collector's guide that had pictures in it. That way it's visually appealing to myself. I took it to Kickstarter, and that became successful, and that's how this whole thing spitballed out of control. Like, I was here 2 years ago just drinking with the rest of the NA guys over in the NA room. That's what I was doing. Now I'm drinking with the NA guys in the NA room still. But I go over here and just do a panel too and talk about stories. I mean, and we do the whole podcast thing, and it all just spitballs out of control. And it's just like, all you have to do is have the passion and put forth some time. Now, is it hard? Yeah, it's hard to do. Because, I mean, I'm sitting there spending my time. I spend my time with my family after my job, and then I edit till midnight or 1 a.m. and I wake up and do work again. That's what you do, though, when you're passionate about something. You want to make it happen. It's craziness, man. Craziness. But that's awesome that you were able to start from a grassroots perspective. That's really, really cool. Let's see here. So the next question, name 4 suits from Super Mario Brothers 3. I want to hear 4. That's an easy question. 4 suits from Mario 3. Does anybody know suits from Super Mario Brothers 3? Come on up.
Come on, Matt.
Come on up. Go ahead. Hey, if nobody's coming up, come on up.
I waited.
Hey, we got the Tanuki suit.
Yep.
Then we got the raccoon suit. There's the the Goomba, the shoe. What's the shoe called? The boots. Karibo's boots. And then my personal favorite, the Hammer Brothers suit.
He went obscure with Karibo's shoe. That deserves a second item. That was good. Yeah, because you also had the frog suit, right? And the fire flower as well. Yeah. So there was actually 6. I was only going to go with 5. You want to get something else? You absolutely can. That was a good answer. So Mario Brothers 3. That's what we're segueing into this one. Obviously, that's the cover of the Video Game Culture Chronicles. My buddy drew that. I keep that as a local artist. But Mario 3 was the game when I feel like Nintendo hit the map officially on a Pepsi level, a Michael Jordan level. Like, they hit worldwide status at that point. That also led in with the movie that was essentially a giant commercial for Nintendo, The Wizard. In 1990, Wizard came to VHS, but 1989 led up to the Nintendo World Championships tournament as well. It spitballed out of control. That's what they did. And, like, Super Mario 3, though, I just remember the first time I watched The Wizard on VHS, because I didn't get to go do it in the theaters like everybody else. And I watched it, and I was so confused, because I'm like, how is this kid Lucas playing the Nintendo, and he's able to find these warp whistles the first time he plays it? I'm like, I found out through, I think it was like somebody on the schoolhouse said, hey, all you gotta do is duck on the white block and you can fall through and then run to the end and get a wizard, get one of the warp whistles. The craziest thing that I found out on my own, though, through the warp whistles, I found out that if you use a warp whistle on the warp whistle screen, you go right down to World 8. And I didn't know that back in the day. So if you collect 2 warp whistles in World 1, use a warp whistle, and use another one on the warp whistle screen, and drip right down to the final level. And that's how you can speed run through the game being a cheating person. So it's hilariousness, though. Mario 3 is a hit.
Mario 3 actually came out, I think, before I got the job at EGM. Isn't it?
Mario 3 was released in
1990, so I was already there. Okay. In Japan it was released. That's one of the games I scooped in my fancy, was Mario 3. Yeah, I was, yeah. I'm trying to think of it. You got something?
So, yeah, that was one that like everybody had. But what was great was it was so hard to find Mario 2 that I think they ordered so many extras that they had tons at the store. So I couldn't believe it still when I was riding home. I was like, I got me a copy. It was one game that everyone knew was good, and it also spurred on like a lot of other really games with like bigger sprites and really colorful, you know, like your Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu, you know, awesome stuff like that. Wacky races, you know, those kind of things. Yes.
Come on up. All right, I want to hear some stories.
My name's Tony. Can't forget about the epic commercial that came out for it, where everybody's shouting Mario. And right before the time of internet, that was the hype train.
They show the whole world with Mario's face on it, and like somehow across the entire country, there's people with Mario's face. It's awesome.
This was well before the internet, of course, kicked things off, and that was the biggest thing that I remember with that. Along with the Wizard, I never got to see it when it originally came out, but that commercial alone made me want the game.
Yeah, they were able to build that game up like it was the biggest thing ever, and it was an awesome game. It's still a lot of people's favorite game of all time. That in Mario World, they flip-flop with the platformers. It's pretty crazy though, really. So so what we'll do is we'll go with another one. You got a Mario 3 story, Martin? Got none yet? That's okay. Not an issue. All right. Here's a good one. All right, we've been talking about Nintendo. Let's switch gears. What was the first pack-in title for the Sega Genesis console? We got one back here. Come on up. You gotta come on up. See if he has it. I don't want to hit the reverb. Here you go.
I believe that was Altered Beast.
You are correct, sir. Go ahead and grab some swag. So yeah, Altered Beast was the first pack, and it's so ironic. A lot of people consider the Genesis synonymous with Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog actually wasn't released until 1991, a couple years after the Sega Genesis came out. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. Like, Altered Beast wasn't really, if you play it right now, it's not that great of a game to play all the time over and over and over and over again.
From your grave!
Yes! But yeah, that was the thing though, is that like, I remember with Altered Beast, my parents used to go bowling back in the day, and we would go to the bowling alley, and they would set me with a couple quarters, let me go play arcade game, and Altered Beast was there. And I always remember like, the guy over there is like, swallow your soul. And he was like, you know what I mean, like, your soul is mine. And like when you would fight him. And I remember with the arcade version, all the voiceovers, and the Genesis did a decent job at translating those voiceovers in a digitalized, consoleized version. It was really good. The irony is you play some of the other ports now, like the Famicom port, and they're, oh my goodness, they're bad. Really bad. But yeah, I used to play it though all the time. So when I saw the Sega Genesis had Altered Beast, I always saw it. I thought it was really cool. That was one of those games though I would play the Sega Genesis at my neighbor's house. So I always got my fix, and it wasn't that good of a game. Like I needed to have it, like a Mario World or something like that. When I was saving up for the Super Nintendo, it wasn't enough to veer me off and spend my money buying my Genesis. But like I really liked the game Altered Beast, and now I go to play it, and it doesn't get my attention as much as all the other games do. It doesn't hold up as well. Which one?
Yeah, as far as the Altered Beast, right? Because there's kind of, when you're a kid, since the game has that gimmick of your guy, you know, gets like this big on like steroids style, and then you finally turn into the Beast. So it's got a cool gimmick. I think even in the first level and either the last level or next to last level, they almost repeat the same guy. I was kind of like, oh, you should have come up with someone new on that, but yeah, it's just one of those gimmicky things that's fun, but when you look back on it, it's limited to how deep you can get on it. But yeah, that was a super important time. And as far as Altered Beast, do you have anything, John?
When I actually saved up for my Genesis and bought it, I launched Genesis when it came out, and to me, Altered Beast was just a bonus. I liked the game, but it wasn't that phenomenal of a game. I really bought the Genesis for Thunder Force 2.
Hell yeah.
Thunder Force 2, when I saw that game, I just had to have it. It was the first time like an arcade game was available at home. An arcade style game was available at home, in my opinion. And then Ghouls and Ghosts, of course, was another phenomenal game.
Yeah, Ghouls and Ghosts was interesting because that was different on every console, except for the Super Graphics was Ghouls and Ghosts. But
the Super Graphics was extremely faithful, but the Master System port for Ghouls and Ghosts, yeah. So the Master System port of Ghouls and Ghosts was different than all the other versions because as you went through Ghouls and Ghosts, you would be able to collect upgrades to your armor. And then they had the green armor, right, when you would go through the arcade version, and Super Graphics transfer that to the Genesis version. The Master System version had a separate way to charge your shots, and it was a red armor. It was completely different how the whole thing worked with all the other games. So that game is almost like a fourth version. The Super Ghouls and Ghosts was another different game. And then later they did Ultimate Ghouls and Ghosts, and that's another different game. But like the Super Ghouls and the Ghouls and Ghosts on the Master System was like its own little property, even though it was a level by level. That's one of those things where when people would port a game to different consoles, you would get developers that would put their own spin on things. So when people would do ports, it's a pretty cool thing. And it's actually something that happens now with people releasing homebrews and things for like current old consoles, putting out new games. You have people that are porting old versions like a Frogger or Leadership Larry, like from what certain people put out, and like Sokuban, like box pusher games. They put like different spins on old tired properties and make them interesting and give them stories and stuff. And that's what some of those developers back in the day would do as well. And the irony was back in the day, because of the box art, we just thought it was Ghouls and Ghosts. That's what we thought it was. It was just Ghouls and Ghosts. And then you don't realize until later, now when you watch YouTube videos with reviews and things, that, oh wait, this one's a completely different experience than playing the arcade. It's a really cool aspect to the whole gaming collecting scene and everything, and it gives it a different reason to have the Master System version, even if you have the Genesis version.
And they're all pretty valuable too. They've been going up, but they're all great games. All right, next question.
All right, so name a game based on a license that is actually good. Any license and explain why. Eric, come on over. You can tell it. Tell your story, man. I love it. Willow's a good game. All right, so name.
So my name is Brian Douglas. So the reason that the Willow game was one of the few that actually had some depth to it, we all know most franchise games, movie franchise games are terrible. Willow was actually a proper RPG in the sense that you could play through it. There were a lot of different places to go, a lot of different environments. The character development was pretty interesting, and actually the gameplay in and of itself was fun. I remember my folks renting it from the video store for me, and I kept it for a solid 2 weeks and told them that I had returned it and ran up a huge late bill. And I hadn't thought about the fact that they could just have bought it for me for a lot less than what we paid in late rental fees. So just a good game. The graphics were pretty stellar too. For a NES game, it was solid. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. How would you compare the Willow Nintendo game to the movie Willow now?
The game was better than the movie. That's just me though.
I almost think that's a movie now that's like cheesy bad, but it's good.
Yeah, Kevin Spacey, early role for Kevin Spacey wasn't he? No.
Kevin Pollak.
Kevin Pollak, right? Because I met him at the Doctor Who convention when I was like that tall. So yes, thank you so much, Spacey Pollak. One too many Miller Lights. Well, I've got to do another. So.
Well, I'm over here drinking a 16-bit double pale ale right now while I do the podcast. They gave me water, and I VGBS, we drink beer. That's what we do.
Excellent.
Go ahead and grab something out of the bag, man. Appreciate the participation. Yeah. So one of my favorite games, and actually it's licensed games are synonymous with being bad. However, when I think good licensed games, I think Disney on the NES. I mean, some of the best games that were released on the NES were released by Capcom and the Disney games. So you had DuckTales, you had Rescue Rangers, you had so many good classics that were released. They had really good gameplay, you had good graphics, you had the music was stellar on those games.
I was going to say Aladdin for the Genesis.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Aladdin for the Genesis was another good one. And even The Lion King as well on Super NES and Genesis was a stellar port. And they were decent. They started to get a little bit off track, I feel, in the 16-bit when they started to hit some of the other, like the Bonkers game, Marsupilami, and some of the random Disney afternoon cartoons that we stopped watching by that point. But like there were so many good games released by Capcom on the NES. It was like ridiculousness.
Yeah, they never seem to miss. One thing about Capcom though is Strider is kind of unforgivable with the glitchiness, and I actually love that game as much as I can. But it's almost like I can't believe that they just let that stand like that.
So Strider, we actually did as a VGBS homework. So on our podcast, we have certain episodes that we dedicate to a homework. So we'll play a game for an entire month, try to beat it, and Strider was one of those games. I had never played through NES Strider up to that point. I've only played the arcade. And we're playing this, it's a completely different game. And we're sitting there glitching things out to actually progress in the level. Because certain enemies would respawn at inopportune times and wouldn't open up a door that we needed to get through the level. And it was one of those crazy things that I actually realized that I didn't really care for that game that much after putting that much time into it. It's pretty cool to pick up and play for like a 15-minute, 30-minute playthrough. But like when you sit there and try to grind through the game, it gets a little painful. And I think one of our next homework assignments, where we do Gremlins 2 on the NES. Yeah, we got a Gremlins 2 episode. What we try to do is we try to hit something that's awesome. You got something? Oh, Gremlins 2, yeah. That's a great game, and that's based on the license as well. Some of the isometric platforming is a little suspect. It's a little bit frustrating at times trying to do, because they have moving platforms over a black hole abyss, and you couldn't really judge your depth as you would jump. but it was really cool to play, though. I enjoyed it, and that'll be what, episode 41, 42 up on the podcast, something up there.
I'm going to have to go with Batman for the NES from Sunsoft. Yeah, that was the first licensed game that I really, really liked. Thought captured the feel of the movie. Interesting story. The original version of it had artwork that was based on the comic book, and then they switched out the graphics with digitized graphics from the movie later. So the one we played at the EGM office was actually more based on the comic book, and I think there's a ROM floating around of that prototype. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So there's a prototype of the original graphics for Batman floating around somewhere. I don't think I've played that one, so that'll be interesting to hunt down and see. That's really cool. All right, we got a story. All right, go ahead. What's your name?
My name is Robin Paul. I'm drinking some Blue Moon that somebody gave to me because, I mean, otherwise I would probably choose something else. But anyway, my thing is, you guys were talking about Capcom. One of the best licensed job of Capcom is what they did with the Marvel series and their fighting games. Starting with X-Men, Children of the Atom, Marvel Superheroes, all the way up to Marvel 2 and 3. Like, these treatments of the Marvel characters were almost better than the actual comics themselves. Like, you know, like with Wolverine's voices and, like, you know, Venom and the characterizations between the two players and stuff. It was really great. My favorite is Marvel Superheroes because it really felt like a comic book. And, like, as you were fighting, Infinity Gems would pop up and everything like that. And the final boss was Thanos, and he was really cheap. And that's really good. So they did those characters right.
What end boss in the old fighting games wasn't cheap? I mean, you ever play versus Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat 2?
Yeah, all of them were bad. Magneto was probably the worst in Children of the Atom, but, you know, yeah, they were all bad.
Yeah, that was awesome, though. Go ahead and get you some swag. Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes left in the panel. I would like to wrap up, but if we have a little bit of time after we wrap up, we'll do another question, give away some more stuff. We got some shirts and things still. So basically, do a little plug. So you got Snoopy, released in 1990, so it's relevant for the panel, unlike the GameCube game earlier. Is Snoopy a good game, though? What do you think?
Probably not.
It's a silly sports spectacular, though, where you get to carry pizza and go like that with the pizza.
Yeah. Most of those games I was talking about, they all came out in the 90s. They all came out in the 90s arcades, so, like...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was all classic. The arcade scene was another awesome version. So, to wrap things up, though, so I'm Jeffrey Wittenhagen again. So I have a book, The Complete NES. It's an NES collector's guide. Basically, I kept it minimalistic style, so it's easy to read. There's some check boxes if you collect the box manual and the cartridges, so it hits every aspect of collecting. It's only licensed. There's going to be a follow-up with the rest of the games missing. It would just be too big of a book for any coffee table at that point. The Video Game Culture Chronicles, I'm doing a Patreon book subscription. It is based on per book, not per month. So when you back it, you get it at cost. I'm starting with 1990, and then I'm progressing to 91, 92. I'm covering every single game for any system, including arcades, pinball, everything that was released. So the guy that's following us over here, Eugene Jarvis, he did Smash TV. There's a Smash TV article right in here, including Narc from the NES was also released in 1990. So we got some aspects of every little part of gaming. No matter what you collect, I'm trying to hit it. And I also did this one a little bit more artistically. So I did a little bit more graphically pleasing to the eye for this book. And I do have a couple copies up for auction. It's going to be in the Nintendo Age Room, and basically it's a silent auction. You go there, write a bid, you can get a copy. I have 4 copies. They're all numbered and everything, and you can get a copy early bird before I do a real print run. And I do have books for sale. I'm at the entrance to the seller tent on the right side. Hardcovers are $70, $30 for the paperbacks. I got a bunch of them, so you guys can go get one. I'll sign them for you. I do gold signatures for the convention, so that way if I ever see them again, I'll know, oh yeah, I was at a convention there. It's pretty cool. I know Martin over here.
Thank you. I'm back in the publishing game. We're starting something a little different. It's called Little Player Magazine. It is a magazine for 5 to 11-year-olds or older. And we only cover E-rated titles. There are no teen or mature video games in this magazine, and it's appropriate for younger players or older players who want to collect a magazine again.
Yeah, so to me, Little Player was a good thing. I know he took it to social or Kickstarter before, and what he's doing now is he's marketing it to like schools and things like that. This is something, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm going to teach her how to read, and she's going to be able to read this and not see a bunch of violence like she's going to see in a normal current gen Grand Theft Auto style magazine. I don't really want her subjected to that. If I can avoid it and she can read something like this. I know he has amiibos in there and he's covering things like Minecraft, so it's stuff that the kids are really like. It's a really cool progression, and I really support that. I'm actually gonna do some articles. I'm gonna do video games then and now in the book, starting issue 2, and I'm gonna take something that has a release coming up, and I'm gonna do the classic version. So if there's a new Mario game coming up, I'm gonna cover some of the old Mario games in there to give kids a retro aspect of things. Because as we know, like, kids nowadays are starting to drive up our collector's market because the teenagers are getting into NES and stuff because it's really cool and they learn about it. And that's a really awesome aspect. And I like that, and I want to, have them learn that at an earlier age. It's a pretty cool thing to me. Kyle, what do you got going on with VGBS? Kyle does all of our editing. So he has a few episodes coming up. What do you got coming up on the podcast, man?
Yeah, we got about 7 more episodes. We're going to do Gremlins. We got Mario RPG. We're hoping to do some kind of Zelda extravaganza spectacular or something. Yeah. So stay tuned.
Yeah, the other side of the things is we do other podcasts. It's called the Phobos Militia, and we cover all different aspects. So we did a Star Wars Episode 7 podcast. We've done what was some of the other ones that we did?
We did a Jedi Outcast one, and then just random. It's just anything that we're into, really.
We also did a WWF and What's Wrong with Wrestling podcast right now. Like, wrestling's getting a little crazy. Oh, absolutely. And the thing is when we record hours upon hours in one setting, and Kyle has to break it all out painstakingly. So basically, we have a lot of recorded information going out. So, does anybody have any gaming stories? We got 5 minutes. Anybody tells us a gaming story, get some swag. Come on up. And also, our magazines and books will be here, so you can come check it out after the panel until they kick us off of here and Eugene needs to come up or whatever. Come out and check out our stuff.
Name's Tony again. I was going to ask you a question, but I'm going to lead into it first. I was going to ask if you guys had any long-distance kind of video game stories as far as how long you might have played one for an extended period of time. Mine, I remember trying to beat with my friend Josh Dragon Warrior in an entire night. We got about probably 3/4 of the way through until the night right near the very end where you end up getting the flame sword or Eredric's armor. And we got right up to that and we ended up hitting that brick wall right at the end just because he would just totally kick you around if you weren't leveled correctly. So that's my story. I was wondering if you guys had anything similar to that.
Stories is what we do. So for mine, I'm going to keep it short so Kyle has one as well. So The Legend of Zelda. Back in the day, I actually didn't own The Legend of Zelda, and I would rent it on the weekend. So when I would rent, I would only get to get one game. So my game this weekend was Legend of Zelda. So I'm playing it, and I didn't sleep for 2 days playing through The Legend of Zelda because I didn't have a walkthrough. I was playing, exploring it just like you're meant to for the first time. So I go through, I have no sleep, I'm tired, I'm going through fighting. I finally get to Ganon, he gets revealed, and the NES starts flashing. And I quickly power it back on, goes there, all the saves are wiped. And so I had no save, I had to restart, and by then it was turning into the morning, so I actually didn't have enough time. I had to take the game back for the weekend. I was so angry that I didn't play The Legend of Zelda for like 5 years after that, until I started to play A Link to the Past. I avoided Zelda 2, I was so angry about The Legend of Zelda. Now that's like my favorite series of all time. But like back then, I just had this, I was so mad that it did that to me. It was like fate destroyed my progress.
Yeah, and with the no death runs, as far as that goes, I remember Gradius. To no depth, I think I practiced that about 2 hours every day for a month until it was a point where I just memorized every single little point. I think that's the big thing about those games. You have to put in the time, and the rewards are really awesome. The only thing is, you almost never want to pick up that game again because all you've done is just play it over and over and over and over, and it's like I'm spent. I'm pretty good. So yeah, that's mine.
This one takes us back to the days when you had to put a password in to continue your game. Not Metroid, but Metal Gear. And man, got almost to the end of the game in one sitting, and then took the password down, and I guess I took it down wrong. Right? I switched out the O for the 0, and when I was a kid, I didn't know any better. So I got really frustrated at the game, and I just put in any kind of code, just random letters and numbers. I ended up at the last boss. Randomly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about the passwords, because some games it was uppercase, lowercase, there were numbers, and you had to just write it down. Where nowadays you can just take a picture with your phone camera, you're good. So wow, how things have changed.
Things have progressed. So we're probably getting a dirty look over here from the guy we're going. We're almost going over in time. That's what we do. So we are VGBS Gaming Podcast. Thanks, Martin, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it, being able to come on as our expert panelist. Yeah, we do that all the time. We don't announce things, and then all of a sudden we have people on the podcast. That's what we do. You can get us on iTunes. We're also at hagensalley.wordpress.com. I have business cards out here, so is Martin. Please check out our books if you're interested at all. We appreciate it. We do everything grassroots. We're not doing anything super commercialized, so we appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And there you go. That's the end of this podcast panel episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, going down memory lane with both Jeffrey Wittenhagen and Kyle Gilbert of the VGBS podcast. And you know what? I have a lot of fuzzy, warm memories about the year 1990 in video games. And I'm glad that they covered it. And I think they covered a lot, actually. So it was a pretty darn good episode, a pretty darn good panel, as a matter of fact. And talking about episode, it's the end of the episode this week. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and game on.